Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a highly underrated Pokemon for the current Open Master League meta, and that is Eternatus. Now, these battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Emmy, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now, in a meta dominated by Reshiram and Zekrom, what makes Eternatus stand out? Well, it's the fact that Eternatus has the fastest dragon damage of any of the dragons, reaching Dynamax Cannon in only 12 turns. So when you combine a massive stat product with very good matchups into both Reshiram and Zekrom, that is the selling point of Eternatus. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. And in game number 1, Kyogre picks up a very strong lead, leading into Zacian. Opponent safe switches into Zekrom, and it's time for the star of the show, Eternatus, to hit the field. Even down a little bit of energy, this is where the pacing on Eternatus is relentless. Dynamax Cannon pressures the shield from Zekrom, and Zekrom actually fired off that energy on the Charge Attack Priority tie. Zekrom did go for the outrage, and now Zekrom is just strictly going to get outpaced. This is not Fusion Bolt range, so even if they fire off the Fusion Bolt, Eternatus would be very easily able to survive. Eternatus takes the knockout, and when Zacian hits the field, we see an immediate pivot back into Kyogre. Now, this Eternatus has made a bit of an interesting choice, opting for Sludge Bomb over Flamethrower, presumably due to the massive rise in Xerneas as the preferred fairy type over Zacian. Unfortunately for this opponent, they are just core broken to smithereens by Kyogre, as they have a Zacian plus Zygarde core, and they are just getting absolutely destroyed by Kyogre. Kyogre able to inflict massive double super effective damage, get a shield as well, and survive an earthquake. And this poor Zygarde is in absolute shambles. Avalanche number 3 will quickly knock out the Zygarde. All they have left in the back is the Zacian, and in comes Zekrom. I'm honestly very surprised the opponent hasn't top left it already. They fire off energy at the Zekrom, they bait with the Behemoth Blade, but there's just 3 Pokemon left, and there's no way they're going to be able to take all 3 knockouts. Fusion Bolt lands, getting this Zacian very low. Even if Zacian's able to make it to a close combat, it's just simply not range for close combat to take the KO. They go for the close combat, easy survive for the Zekrom. This game was over for a while. Kyogre was very strong in this matchup, but honestly, Eternatus dominating that mid-game also really set the team up for success. Hopping into game number 2, oh my goodness, what a lead. Kyogre into Ho-Oh. Opponent safe switches into Dialga, and this is a weak spot for this team. This team is very soft to Dialga. However, Eternatus is very, very bulky, so even though Eternatus is at a type disadvantage in this matchup, Eternatus should still be able to play this very close. Eternatus will have to respect the potential Roar of Time. Unfortunately, it is going to be the Iron Head bait, but Dialga doesn't build up to the Roar of Time. Instead, they just settle for Iron Head. Iron Head will hit for neutral damage, but Eternatus will be able to hang on and make it to a second Dynamax Cannon. This Dynamax Cannon won't take the knockout, but look how much work Eternatus did in a negative matchup. Now this sets up a nasty farm down for Zekrom, and it doesn't matter what the opponent has in the back, the game is already over. They have Xerneas, so they have a decent answer to the Zekrom, but they're ABA weak to Kyogre. So this game is just already a loss for the opponent. Fusion Bolt does very nice damage, in comes Kyogre, and what is the opponent ever going to do? Kyogre puts up the shield as Xerneas full sends the Moonblast, there's the pivot into Ho-Oh, and Ho-Oh is about to get crushed by Origin Pulse. Ho-Oh still does have one Protect Shield to hide behind, and they're going to use it here. But shielding a Ho-Oh when your opponent has a Kyogre and a Zekrom, in my eyes, is a pretty ill-advised strategy. They fire off the Brave Bird, but Kyogre hangs on. There's the pivot into Zekrom. Kyogre banked the Charge Attack for later, and Zekrom is going to be winning Charge Attack priority. Fusion Bolt will easily take the knockout, and with a Charge Attack loaded on Kyogre, this game is over. Back in comes the Xerneas. Xerneas will be able to secure the KO, but the damage is already done. Kyogre was not eliminated, and Kyogre has an entire Origin Pulse. Only going to go for the Avalanche, because either Charge Attack will take the knockout here, but that was a very convincing Game 2 win. We move to game number 3. Kyogre going to be greeted with a bit of an awkward lead, leading into Kyurem White. Kyurem White's charge stacks are fully walled, but Ice Burn is such an incredibly efficient attack that it's still going to inflict some pretty devastating damage. And oh, that's a bold play from Kyurem, playing to the charge attack priority tie. If that was not charge attack priority, an entire free waterfall would have snuck, but the gamble ends up paying off. Avalanche is going to connect. There's the pivot out into Eternatus. Opponent's going to answer with Xerneas, but Xerneas is about to be in for a pretty nasty surprise. Even if Eternatus has Flamethrower, I believe Flamethrower Eternatus does win the zeros versus Xerneas. But this is an Eternatus that is running Sludge Bomb, and Sludge Bomb is going to inflict devastating damage. Moonblast would not have knocked out the Eternatus because it only hits for neutral, but at this point, Eternatus is up so much energy that HP on Eternatus is probably going to be very valuable. Dynamax Cannon will be shielded, and oh my goodness, what a catch! able to save Eternatus, catch the Moonblast onto Kyogre, and now Eternatus has an entire Dynamax cannon loaded for later in the game. Timer hits 0, back in comes Eternatus, opponent reveals they have Kyogre in the back, and this Kyogre is about to have a pretty terrible day, as Dynamax Cannon after Dynamax Cannon are going to crash into Kyogre, and Kyogre is going to have to shield or they are getting KO'd here. Shield comes up from Kyogre. Kyogre can never farm down. They're forced to fire off an Avalanche at the bulky Eternatus, and from here, it's just going to be the Zekrom show. Zekrom is up a shield. It gets to convert that shield advantage into a big energy advantage, and Zekrom will very comfortably be able to close out the game. Quick switch from the opponent into the Kyurem, trying to make it to a move, but they're just simply never going to get there. Zekrom makes the Fusion Bolt, knocking out Kyurem, and all the opponent has left is the Xerneas. Xerneas can make it close combat, but close combat is never taking the knockout here. Zekrom is just simply too healthy. Close combat is going to land. Zekrom even can just fully farm down and exit with the Fusion Bolt loaded. It would have been a pretty safe play to fire off the Fusion Bolt, but this is the way flashier way to win the game. Double resisted Dragon Breath out of Xerneas, Fusion Bolt Kyogre, and take the win. Picking up a pretty awkward lead in the next match, Kyogre into Palkia. A save switch into Eternatus is going to be answered with a Confusion Meloetta. Now this is a pretty bad matchup for Eternatus. Eternatus not going to do well here. It's getting shredded by these confusions. Dynamax Cannon still inflicts some pretty severe damage, but I would imagine Psyshock will be able to secure the KO. Shield comes up from Eternatus, but this still just feels like a matchup where Eternatus is never going to be able to generate any kind of meaningful advantage. Dynamax Cannon will be shielded up by Meloetta. Meloetta going to be met with a quick switch into Kyogre. Kyogre kind of has the no shield. There is a Palkia that is awaiting it, but the Meloetta has Thunderbolt, and it feels like it's all going wrong. In comes Palkia, and Palkia is not letting even a little bit of damage land on it as they charge that priority tie Aqua Tail to the Avalanche. Eternatus is pretty close to a Dynamax Cannon, but it is getting rather low. In comes Eternatus. Eternatus does reach Dynamax Cannon. This will inflict devastating damage onto the Palkia, but Palkia puts up the final shield. In comes Zekrom, but Zekrom is going to have to do so much work this game. Tough call to make. Zekrom going to be no shielding. Palkia does only go for an Aqua Tail, so a nice call from the Zekrom, but unfortunately this really feels like it's death by 1,000 cuts. Aqua Tail after Aqua Tail. Pressuring the shields in the back is Zacian. 2 Fusion Bolts should come very close to picking up the knockout, but that's a lot of energy that the Zekrom is going to have to use here. Fusion Bolt number 1 gets them below half HP. Fusion Bolt number 2 will take the knockout, but now this poor Zekrom is completely out of energy. Oh, they actually barely hang on. A very nice catch onto the Eternatus, but unfortunately, I just think the damage is done, because Palkia will always be able to outpace and make the Aqua Tail. In comes Palkia. Oh my goodness, and they catch on the Meloetta. They didn't even have to do that. They're just flexing. Oh my goodness, what a catch. They had the move on Palkia. Come on, trainer. They are just flexing like crazy. What a catch. Unfortunately, that game will end in defeat. Hopping into the next match, Kyogre into Dialga. This is another pretty awkward lead for this team. Immediate save switch into Eternatus, and Eternatus is going to be answered with Landorus. A rare Pokemon that actually is a source of ground damage in the Master League. I feel like even with the buff to Mudshot, you really don't see a lot of Landorus. If you're running a ground type, you're probably running Groudon, but Landorus, unfortunately not being able to ever farm anything down, ends up feeling like a bit of a hindrance. Eternatus is still able to force energy and get a shield advantage, so Eternatus ended up working out pretty nicely. In comes Kyogre. Kyogre is going to have to eat energy here from the Landorus, and Landorus does make the Stone Edge. This Stone Edge is going to hurt. That is quite a lot of HP lost, but the good news for Kyogre is that Kyogre is now not debuffed. So it's a lot lower on HP than it may have wanted to be, but this energy is actually useful without having to pivot out. Avalanche is going to crash into Dialga. There's the pivot into Zekrom, and suddenly, this game feels like it's flipped on its head. All the momentum now with the Zekrom. Zekrom going to be shielding obvious Iron Head baits just to try and preserve even a little bit of HP, and the opponent has a Ho-Oh in the back. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Pretty neutral lead in the next match, Kyogre into Reshiram. Opponent's not going to stick around though. They're going to immediately save switch into Lunala. Lunala up energy could be quite scary for this team, but the opponent does throw on poor timing, giving 2 free turns to Kyogre. Shadow Ball is going to land, Kyogre farming all the way up to back-to-back avalanches, really looking to try and turn up the pressure on Lunala. Avalanche bait is no shielded. That is unfortunate for Kyogre, but Kyogre does have a second avalanche loaded. Lunala just going to fully no shield. In comes Reshiram to be instantly met with Eternatus. Eternatus can only be hit with a Crunch or a Fusion Flare. This is not a Stone Edge or a Draco Meteor. Reshiram goes for the Crunch, and Crunch really does not do much. The bulk on Eternatus is just immense. Eternatus should be able to make a second Dynamax Cannon if they try and farm down, and they know it, they're forced to throw energy, but Eternatus puts up the shield, smelling blood in the water, trying to grab the final shield, and then potentially set up Zekrom with a shield advantage to sweep this game. Dynamax Cannon takes the knockout, shield advantage will not be won, and it's Palkia in the back. Now this could be a little bit tricky. Palkia gonna be immediately hit with the Fusion Bolt. This is guaranteeing the final shield. But if Palkia plays his cards right, it's going to be going for an Aqua Tail into a farm down. That's always going to be the best play from the opponent, and they know it. They go for it. Aqua Tail doesn't get the farm down. Barely hanging on is Zekrom. I did not think Zekrom was surviving. 1 HP in a dream. Oh my goodness, what a win. We move to the next match, Kyogre into Zamazenta. This is a very favorable lead for Kyogre. It's the Ice Fang Zamazenta. Either fast move would be resisted. Zamazenta farming up a ton of energy, and Kyogre is going to go for an Avalanche bait. Bit of a risky bait here. If they end up no shielding, this could go very wrong, but thankfully they do put up the shield. Close combat's not going to one-shot Kyogre, but it would do quite a lot of damage. Kyogre puts up the shield, there's the save switch into Dialga, and this is consistently a problem Pokemon for the team. Avalanche is going to chip Dialga, and now in comes Eternatus. Eternatus will always be able to outpace here, which is really nice. Making the Dynamax Cannon, and this is going to be putting Dialga very, very low. Dynamax Cannon lands, it even just straight up takes the knockout, down goes Dialga, and back in comes Zamazenta. This is a scenario where not having Flamethrower is a little bit unfortunate, but I assume Eternatus is just going to let itself get knocked out here by the Behemoth Bash. The threat of the Flamethrower was still enough to pressure a shield, and now back in comes Kyogre. But unfortunately, Kyogre is now out of energy. It's getting outpaced. Close combat is going to inflict deadly damage onto Kyogre, and it's a simultaneous switch, and that is not what we were hoping to see, as it's Zekrom into Xerneas. And Xerneas should be able to close out this game for the opponent. They still have Zamazenta with a decent amount of HP remaining in the back. Shield comes up on the Moonblast, but unfortunately, it's just too little too late. The Geomancies have shredded through Zekrom. Zekrom's already lost over half of its health purely off of the Geomancy fast move pressure. Fusion Bolt number 2 is going to be shielded, but unfortunately, Zekrom just doesn't have the energy needed. Xerneas is the most convincing of the fairy types for this exact reason. Xerneas is just so strong into the dragons. Kyogre needed a farm down to win, but unfortunately, it's just simply not to be. We get up a great lead in the next match, Kyogre into Tyranitar. Opponent safe switches into Reshiram, and that's going to be immediately answered with Eternatus. I did see a legend team that was Tyranitar, Reshiram, and Ho-Oh. And if this is that team, then this game is probably just over. They end up getting one shot by Dynamax Cannon. Back in comes the Tyranitar. But if they're running that team, they're ABA weak to Kyogre, so this game is already over. Tyranitar takes huge damage, Tyranitar trying to farm down, and Tyranitar realizes it's not able to do so. Tyranitar will throw energy, Brutal Swing will take the knockout, and from here, yeah, the opponent just resigns the match. It probably was the team ABA to Kyogre, and man, did they get punished. Picking up a bit of a tricky lead in the next match, Kyogre into Lunala. Lunala will have a pacing advantage in this matchup. Shadow Ball is survivable for Kyogre, but will inflict some pretty significant damage. Shadow Ball is going to land, Kyogre going to farm up a ton of energy, not opting for the Origin Pulse, instead going to opt for the Avalanche bait, trusting that Lunala wants the shield. Lunala does put up the shield, Lunala will outpace, Kyogre fires off another Avalanche, but it looks like Lunala is just going to go for a double shield farm down. Shield comes up, Kyogre actually let itself get farmed down. I'm a little bit surprised that there wasn't a pivot out there, because now this Lunala has so much energy. Shadow Ball crashes into Eternatus. Eternatus already hit by Shadow Ball number 2, that's going to force a shield as well, and things are suddenly looking pretty dire. Lunala can also pivot out of this matchup. There it is, there's the catch attempt. They send in Zacian, and unfortunately with no Flamethrower, that means Eternatus is walled. Eternatus pivots out, in comes Zekrom, but Zekrom makes the back-to-back Fusion Bolts. And this is massive because this means Zacian is only getting one of its 2 close combats, but the Zekrom didn't throw the move. Zekrom could have cap-tied and denied the second close combat, but doesn't end up throwing, and now the opponent gets both of their close combats. And unfortunately, that mistake is probably going to be game losing. Fusion Bolt will take the knockout, but the damage is done. Zekrom could have charge attack Priority Tide on the first one, shielded the close combat, and then the opponent would have just lost the second move. But now they were able to get big damage and a shield and a combo play at the end with Lunala. Shadow Ball KOs Eternatus. A close game, but unfortunately one that will not end in a win. We see a very familiar lead in the final match, Kyogre into Tyranitar. The opponent safe switches into Reshiram, answered with Eternatus. Tell me this isn't the Tyranitar Reshiram Ho-Oh team once again. Dynamax Cannon takes the one-hit knockout, opponent quits. Please stop running AVA Weak to Kyogre. Kyogre is real. It is a Pokemon that's run in the Master League, and if you run Tyranitar plus Ho-Oh Core, you are definitely going to get swept by it. All in all, these are some very fun battles, so many thanks for the battle submission. Eternatus was actually a Pokemon that I was looking at for the Master League myself, just because it looks like it has a lot of favorable matchups right now. I do think that Eternatus will probably be more consistent with Flamethrower, just because Flamethrower gives you an out if you run into Zacian, but considering that at higher elo, Zacian is a lot less common than Xerneas, I do think Sludge Bomb is some pretty interesting tech. The consistency of Eternatus is really what makes it stand out in this meta, in a meta that has Reshiram and Zekrom as the best Pokemon currently in my eyes. Being a dragon that is significantly bulkier than them and can outpace them to dragon damage is extremely critical. Palkia really ends up struggling into Xerneas, like Palkia has basically no counterplay there. But Eternatus, even if you're running Flamethrower, being able to win the zeros is a huge win for Eternatus. So it's very bulky, it has the fastest dragon damage of any of the dragons. Even if we're counting like base form Kyurem, that's still 13-12 to Dragon Claw, whereas the Dynamax Cannon is straight 12. So it's just simply the fastest source of dragon damage in this meta, and it can definitely overwhelm teams. I really wanted to try out this Pokemon myself, but unfortunately queue times have made it very difficult for me to play the Master League. I'm currently sitting around 3130 elo, which is like top 20 worldwide, and unfortunately the queues, even in Spring Cup, are pretty bad at that elo, so the Master League queues, as you can imagine, are pretty non-existent. So I do hope, hopefully, over the next few days that I can end up tanking some elos, so when Great League comes back, I'll at least be able to play the game more consistently, because I would love to be able to play some of the Master League a bit more. It's a very fun meta, and I think that there's a lot of Pokemon that are a bit underrated just because there's not really a lot of Master League content made across YouTube. And I do want to try and be someone who can feature a lot of Master League content because I think Master League is in a really good state right now. There's a lot of Pokemon that are very strong, and it's not really any of like the weird shadows where like if you didn't have a Shadow Hunter Rhyperior, you were at a massive disadvantage. It's Pokemon that have been in raids time and time again. Obviously, Eternatus is the exception. Eternatus is a very difficult Pokemon to obtain, but Eternatus is definitely more anti-meta than core meta. Pokemon like Resh, Zek, and Zern all being so strong, and Lunala, Pokemon that have been in raids again and again and again, is something that I like to see. Because those Pokemon that even if you don't end up going crazy and getting a bunch of XLs one time, they've been around so many times you can passively accumulate XLs and get pretty close to them. So I really like this Master League meta. I think there's a lot to explore about it, and I do hope that I get to play it more this season, because honestly, it looks very fun. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.